Hello, hello. We are live. Hi, how are you? Welcome to today's conversation. My name is Linda Downey, and if you are just coming across me for the first time, I'm a functional health practitioner and a transformational health coach with an emphasis on spirituality and spiritual development. And this conversation is streaming in multiple places on social media. It's also an episode for my podcast, The Unconditioned Life. So The Unconditioned Life is all about leaving the conditioning, the programming, the patterns of your past and creating a life newly in the way that you want. So really putting aside the pain of your past, where you feel stressed out, overwhelmed, all of that, and putting that aside and being able to create a vibrant, healthy, joyful future, if that's what your choice is to do. So that's what the podcast is about. And this episode, this conversation, is taking a look at our predictable, probable future that's already going to unfold as more of our past. It's kind of more of the same. So I'm going to talk about that and how past trauma is part of and really plays a role in why that happens. So what I mean by predictable, probable future. Oh, and before I dive into that, please say hello. Please say where you're listening from or watching from if you watch the replay later. And I will make sure that I say hello back, and I'll also make sure that I answer any questions if I can. So I may not see your comment in the moment because this is going to a lot of places, but I will certainly check back and do my best to respond as soon as I can. Okay, so now that I said that, let me dive in. When I talk to people, hi Diana, thank you. Hi Diana from Florida, thank you for saying hi. When I talk to people, and my own life was a pattern of more of the same. So it might be in your relationships. I talk to women a lot, and some of them have been divorced more than once, or even not marriages, but relationships. Hi, thank you for saying hi. Is that Ashton? Thank you. So people see the same things play out over and over. Their relationships, it might be a different person, different face, different circumstances, but how they feel in the relationship, whether they feel connected or whether they have a sense of they're kind of abandoned or there's a disconnect, that keeps showing up. So that's a pattern, and that's a predictable, probable pattern for future relationships. Or it might be in the area of health. They might, this was really what got me into this whole area of my life, was because I struggled with health starting in my early 20s. So I'm almost 60. So 40 years ago, I started to have health issues, and then the next one would show up and the next one would show up. And it became this pattern in my life, and I would do everything that I could to fix that and address that, but then the next thing would show up. So predictable, probable futures come from pasts that have not been healed and that have not been fully dealt with and are still playing out in our current present. And then it's going to be our future. It doesn't just magically stop. I wish it did. I totally wish it did, but it doesn't. It doesn't just magically stop. It takes something to make sure your future is not going to be more of the past. So how is trauma a part of that? Because that's how I titled this conversation, is what's the link between trauma and your predictable, probable future? So trauma, when we have, and it's really any life experience that causes us pain. Trauma can be really big, significant things that happened. It could also be very normal life experiences, but when they happen, we experience pain. And in the moment of that pain, we do something to cope with the situation, and we do something to avoid feeling more pain again. And it's really about the change that happens within us. It's not about the event, even for the really significant big deal events. It's not about those. It's not about the event, because the event happened and is over. And sometimes it was 30, 40 years ago. The issue is what happens inside of us, what we did to cope with that event, and what we decided about ourselves. And then that's the link to the predictable, probable future that keeps showing up in our lives, because it is really that coping mechanism and what we decided about ourselves, our beliefs, because those don't go away. We keep coping in the same ways and we keep believing the same things, which is why our future, our present and our future, keeps being predictable. It keeps being more of the same. So, I don't know where you're at if you're listening to this, not physically where you're at, but where you're at in your life. But just take a moment and look and see, do you recognize that there have been patterns? I'm guessing if you're listening to the conversation, something intrigued you enough to tune in. So where are your patterns? What keeps showing up the same? Maybe it's in your job. Maybe you get so far in your job and then there could be an opportunity for more advancement, or there could be an opportunity to do something, but it doesn't happen. It sort of ends up playing out the same way. Or maybe in your job, it's you keep finding yourself with a boss or teammates, people, co-workers, and you're having the same experience of not being respected, not being listened to. You're the one who takes all the work home. You're the one who pulls the extra hours, like that. So that's the predictable, probable. It doesn't matter what job you go to, that keeps happening. Or in your partner relationships, it's kind of the same thing. You feel like you're not being listened to, you feel like you're not being respected, or you're the one who's always working really hard to make the relationship go, or to make your family dynamic go. All right, so it's more of the same, even if it's a different person. I usually work with women, so I'm just going to say, even if it's a different guy or woman, whatever, but even if it's a different face, different circumstances, how you feel in that partnership stays in a very predictable, probable pattern. So in order to shift from predictable and probable into something else is possible, just the possibility of something else, because if you're looking in your life, and a lot of people, by the time they reach out to me or leave a comment or we connect in some way, they will have stopped seeing possibility for their life. They won't see it anymore. They'll just be like, this is how my life is. This is how the relationships are. This is how it is for me in jobs. Like, this is just how my life is. And they don't really even see a possibility. And that has to do with the beliefs that they decided about themselves back when that first trauma occurred. So if you're just jumping in, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago about past events in our lives, and it's really about what we made those events mean, much more than the event itself. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, something happens. I'm going to give you an example in my life. I grew up in an alcoholic household. So my dad, I adored my dad. He passed away in 1996, but I still love my dad. I still think of things about him, but he was an alcoholic. And when I was very young, so my mom died when I was 4. And so she had been sick. And so we were a lot at babysitters. And my dad, probably because he was drinking, but he would sometimes, call and say, I'm going to get you in the morning. You're going to sleep over at the babysitter's. And I was 4 years old. And I made that mean about me. I mean, it wasn't abusive. He didn't do anything like that, other than he kind of wasn't there, not available. I made that mean men will leave me. Men abandon me. I didn't necessarily have the conscious thought like that as a 3-year-old, but that was with the work that I've done now. I can very clearly see that. I remember the feelings of being at the babysitters and not being picked up. And I remember like the devastation. And the babysitter was nice. It wasn't bad people, but the devastation when she would say, your daddy's not coming. And that was how I made it mean. So now that is a belief that I held all through growing up, through teenage years, into my 20s, actually up into like my 40s, to be honest. And what would happen is I would keep finding myself in relationships with men where I felt abandoned. Sometimes it was they worked a ton and they were always working. Nothing was wrong. Thanks, Diana. Thanks. But I appreciate that. Diana's saying that that's hard on a toddler. And it is, but it's life experience, and we all have something, that shaped us. But if it's not healed, that's what I want to really share, because for a long time, I didn't know that that was there. I didn't know that that was in the background for me. And I would find myself in partnerships with men where I was like abandoned, like they were either never around because they were working, or we enjoyed each other's company, but we had really different interests. So I was doing my thing and he was doing his thing. And, we would spend some time together, but it wasn't connected like we were really sharing. And it fit my belief. It wasn't a conscious belief. I didn't know that I thought that about men at the time in my 20s, but it was there. And so the partnership felt normal. It felt like that's how it is. And then that partnership would end in the next one. So different face, different circumstances, but I still always felt abandoned. So I'm just giving you my example, right? Just look and map this conversation onto yourself, whether it's relationships or job success. Maybe you have a belief about life is hard. Maybe people said that in your household growing up. Listen, life is hard. Life is hard. We don't get what we want. You have to work really hard, whatever it is. Or relationships are hard. I had a client last fall, and we were doing some of this kind of work in our client work. And she said, she's married, and she said, well, marriages are hard. And when we looked, her example in her household growing up was a very tumultuous marriage. And her mom always shoving her emotions down, her mom always trying to deal with it, keep the peace. And so her belief was, well, marriages are hard. They just are. She didn't have the example that they didn't have to be hard. So what keeps showing up for her is more difficulties in the marriage. And it made sense to her that it would be difficult because it met her belief. So when we want to go from a predictable, probable future to something different is possible, like a world of possibility, you first have to be able to even see something else is possible. Because if you think marriages are hard, you're not even going to imagine that there's a different way for you to be in your marriage, for your marriage to be. Or your health. Health is another one. That was where a lot of my issues showed up as well. My health started really challenging me in my early 20s. So if you have a belief like, well, so my mother died, right? My mother died when I was 4 from autoimmune issues. I got diagnosed with autoimmune. So there's a belief like, well, this is my genetics. This is what I have. And I kept dealing with more symptoms, another autoimmune. I'm happy to tell you now, I have 0 symptoms from my autoimmunity. And I had 4 different diagnoses starting in my 20s. Ulcerative colitis, Hashimoto's, Graves' disease. Graves was first, and then Hashimoto's, rosacea. So none of those are a problem for me now. I don't have any symptoms, but I had to deal with the beliefs that this is how my health is. This is my genetics. This is the way it's going to go. So, because that is what kept showing up. So if we want to go from predictable, probable to something else is possible, like, is it possible for me to actually really have a healthy body that doesn't struggle? Is that possible? Is it possible for me to be connected to someone and not feel like I'm always on my own within the relationship? Is that possible? So you have to first look at the beliefs that are there, your subconscious beliefs. And we do a lot of work. I do a lot of work around this with my clients, is digging out, because they're subconscious. They're the most powerful driver in your life, but a lot of times we don't even know they're there. So when you actually see that, you can start to live in possibility instead of probability. And now the next step beyond that, which I didn't really even put in the title, but I want to share with you, is okay, I could see it's possible. Okay, I can see having different health issues, or not having health issues is how I should say that, a different way of being in my physical body. I could see that that could be possible. I could see that there are examples of people who have relationships that are really connected and loving and great. I can see that. And maybe it is possible for me too. So when we start to collapse and dismantle the subconscious beliefs and build new ones, possibility is born. Possibility is present. But now to go from it's possible to actually, how do I make that happen? When I have no experience and no evidence of being in a relationship in a different way, how do I make that happen? When I have had health issues my whole life and no evidence that I could be healthy and vibrant again, how do I make that happen? When I have no evidence that I can actually be in a job where I feel lit up and successful and on purpose and happy with what I'm doing, how do I make that happen? So that's the next level beyond possibility. So we go from predictable, probable, which is where we're stuck in the meanings and the coping mechanisms that we needed to take on when certain life events happened, particularly when we're young, and in the meanings that we created when those life experiences happened. We are stuck in that predictable, probable future. When we start to identify the beliefs that are keeping us stuck, we now open the door for possibility. Hold on, Diana, I'll answer that. Diana's asking me, how did I heal the autoimmune issues? And I'll answer that in 1 second. But now we open the door for possibility and we start to see something else is possible. But a lot of people can get stuck in the possibility realm without really knowing, now, how do I go and create that? And the level that's required of that is not only dismantling your subconscious beliefs, but it's also learning how to manage your energetic frequency and vibration. So if that's a new concept for you, if you're like, what is she talking about? 100 years ago, Einstein proved without a shadow of a doubt that everything is energy, and that includes us. And for the past 100 years, since he proved that, science has gotten better and better and better with technology at really understanding that and seeing that at an atomic level, we are all just energy. And that energy has a certain vibration to it. What you're experiencing in your life is determined by your energy, your vibration, and your frequency that you're living at, because this energetic vibration and this frequency can only produce outcomes that are equal to that. I can't be living here at this frequency and produce an outcome that's here, right? I have to change the vibration because it's physics. It's like a magnet. It's actually what you attract by your vibration. So here's an example. If you have two guitars in a room, so one guitar is sitting on this side of the room, one guitar is sitting on the opposite side of the room, and the guitars have been tuned. You know, when you tune a musical instrument, they're tuned to each other. If you pluck the G string on this guitar, the G string on that guitar is going to start vibrating. You didn't touch it. It's over on the other side of the room. It's going to start vibrating, and you'll even hear the sound because the vibration that they're at is the same. Once it's the same, they have to be a match, right? They're going to influence each other. If the two guitars were not tuned to each other, if you didn't bother to tune them and you pluck the string on one, the other one wouldn't respond. It wouldn't resonate. It's when they are in tune with each other. So the same thing, when we're in tune in our body, whatever our vibrational frequency is going to naturally be in tune with something that's at the same frequency. So what does that mean within the context of this conversation? Because I might change and realize, oh, there's another way I could think. I could actually think that partnerships are connected and not a lot of work. Okay, but if I don't change the vibrational frequency that lives inside my body, I will keep attracting a partner who's going to bring me the same that I've always gotten before. They're going to bring me the same kind of partnership. I've got to change my vibrational frequency inside my body, not only how I think. And that's like the ultimate part. If you're paying attention to any of this, that's the manifesting part, creating what you want. It all comes down to your energy frequency. That's how we attract things. It's your vibrational frequency. So you can think all you want and change some of your predictable, probable outcomes to some other things by changing your thinking. But ultimately, if you really want to create, not just kind of live in possibility, but actually be responsible for creating something very different in your life, it's the energy that you want to get a hold of. So I just want to answer Diana's question before we go on too much longer. So Diana asked me, how did I heal autoimmune issues? So autoimmunity is the immune system's inability to recognize the body that it's protecting, right? The immune system lives in this body and its job is to protect it, but it doesn't recognize the tissues, whatever the autoimmune issue is, the certain tissues of the body as friend. It attacks inappropriately. And autoimmune symptoms are on a spectrum. So when you learn how to manage your body and allow your nervous system, the nervous system governs the immune system. And the nervous system is your stress, your fight or flight, goes back to childhood wounding and coping. Living in an alcoholic household as a very young child, there was a way of coping that I took on being that kept my nervous system triggered on. I'm not safe. My dad is not coming home. I don't feel safe here. Maybe I'm not good enough for him to come home to. All of those things. You stay there for a long enough period of time and the immune system's going to be affected, and that will trigger autoimmune responses. What ones they are for me versus you, that's like a lot of that is genetics, but you can turn the genetic switch off for whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or thyroid or multiple sclerosis or whatever it is. You can turn that gene off by learning how to regulate your nervous system. And you learn how to regulate your nervous system by understanding that those trauma responses, the way that you started coping when you were very young, is keeping your nervous system triggered on. So that was a little bit, I'll do another conversation about that this week, Diana, maybe more specifically about that, okay? But that is when I went back to school to become a functional health practitioner because of my health. I was like, I am not getting where I want to go by doctors and prescriptions. I'm just managing prescriptions. So I went back to school, and that really set me on the trajectory of understanding that it was my early childhood life experiences. You're welcome, Diana. Yeah, my first thyroid issue was Graves'. That showed up in my early 30s. And then about 10 years later, I had Hashimoto's, and I was like, why did that happen? How do I go from hyperthyroid to low thyroid? And the endocrinologist that I was seeing said, sometimes that's just what happens. That was the answer. Okay, now here's the prescriptions that you need. So when I went back to school to become a functional health practitioner, it was with a commitment and a goal to learn how to support my body so I wouldn't be on more prescriptions. Where that journey took me was actually the realization of what I'm sharing with you right now, which is my early childhood experiences were the driver for a nervous system that stayed triggered on, which then caused my immune system to not function because it's taking its orders from the nervous system. And it was my behind the scenes beliefs that I'm not safe. Um, and I didn't have a bad childhood in terms of, safety, but I decided I wasn't safe because I never knew if my dad was going to show up or not, especially after my mother died. So that affects your health, okay? But in terms of whatever it is in your life, whether it's your health, whether it's your relationships, whether you're continually finding a partner where you have to prove you're lovable enough by really working hard to get their approval, because that feels normal. All right. But to go from predictable, probable like that to possibility is to recognize your subconscious beliefs and then work on changing them. To go from seeing possibility to actually creating something different is the deeper work of your energy, your frequency, and your vibration. So that's really the process, and it's really up to you. Like you get to decide where you want to live your life. Sometimes predictable, probable. Some people are like, at least I know what's coming. To me, if I know what's coming, but it's predictably not great, it's predictably a struggle, it's predictably hard or sad or unfulfilling, I don't want to stay there. That's not the life that I want. But we all get to say, so there's a couple things now I want to say to wrap up the conversation. So as I've said a couple times here, the work that I do with my clients is around understanding. I mean, it's part of it. We do a lot of things, but part of it is understanding those subconscious beliefs and figuring them out and then rewiring them, really rewiring how we think and see. And those neural pathways, if you start when you're 3 years old, men abandon me, or life isn't safe, or I'm not good enough, daddy's not coming home, so I must not be good enough for him to come home. That's how a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old thinks. They don't have the ability to think like we do when we're grown-ups. So now that neural pathway is just thoughts that have been wired and fired over and over and over again. It creates a really like a deep rut in the road, right? Where the tires just automatically go. So you've got to rewire that. You've got to actually rewire your neural thinking. And then changing the energy in your body is a whole other process. So what I wanted to say is, in terms of all of that, the work that I do with my clients, we go right away into our beliefs and really looking at what ones are not working for us. Where did they come from? What do we need to rewire? Then we also do a lot of work on changing the energy and getting the trauma, the emotion of that pain, that painful experience. When I was 3 years old and cried myself to sleep because daddy didn't pick me up, that stays in our body if we don't have the tools and the ability and the freedom and grace to express it, which I did not. If we don't, then it stays in our body, and that affects the emotional or the energetic frequency. So we need to get those out, change the frequency. In May, I'm starting a 3-month, it's called Manifesting Mastery, Manifest Mastery, Manifestation, something like that, Mastery. And it's a 3-month program on exactly learning the process to shift your beliefs and to change your energy and to create, to get very clear, what do you want to create in any of those areas or all of those areas, and then how to do it. So the links for that, I'll post the link after this, and you'll be hearing about it for the next month ongoingly because it's going to start in May. That's a 3-month mastery program. My regular work that I do with clients is it's also about 3 months, but we do a lot more than just that. We actually really go into reparenting, a lot of different tools that we need to really shift. So if you have any questions on either one of those, please drop me a comment and I will post the link to the mastery. You don't have to have done the foundational work that I do with my clients in order to do this mastery. You can really learn enough of how to shift your beliefs and how to change your energetic frequency without doing all the other deeper work that I do in the 3-month intensive with my people. So if you have any questions, please ask them, and I'm happy to find your comments and I'll answer them. And thank you for saying hello now. And if you watch the replay later, thank you for saying hello then. And, just a reminder, maybe you're just coming across me now, but in the mornings, a few mornings a week, I do short 5-minute over a cup of coffee, first thing in the morning, conversations, little ways to make a difference in your life. So make sure you check those out. And I do usually 2, sometimes 3 of these longer conversations every week. So just stay tuned and make sure you're on a place where you're welcome. Facebook user says thank you, where you get the notifications. Okay. And I will see you in the next, either over a cup of coffee or in a conversation like this. And I wish you well. And definitely leave me a comment if you want or ask a question. Thanks, Diana. You too. Have a great evening.